Welcome to Fan4Racing Radio. I'm Fan4Racing Sharon, and we have quite a crew here tonight joining us for the show. And joining me for tonight's show is a guest for tonight, Garen Bach. He is the host of NASCAR Lap by Lap on the Bleacher Report Sports Network. Welcome to the show, Garen.
It's the Bleacher Brothers.
Bleacher Brothers.
It's all good. It's all good. I've not made it up there yet. But
okay, the Bleacher
I'm excited
Brothers.
to be here. Mm-hmm.
I had it right before and then messed up on the live stream. Also joining us, of course, is Jay Huseman, the big mouth of the Mid-South. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And my voice is a little bit different as Chris's is because I did work this past weekend at Jackson Motor Speedway, but that's not going to stop me.
Okay. And then, of course, Chris Crichton is back this week after being off last week. He is, I can't quite read it, so you're going to have to say it, Chris.
Well, they call me the dirtiest voice in the South, but I go by the tagline, flag of caution.
Yes, the flag of caution. And Chris goes way back with us, even before Jay was on the show.
Yeah, that's wild, man. I've been
Isn't
around
that
a while.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Well, we have a lot of hot topics to discuss. And Chris, since you weren't here last week, I'm going to make you come up with the first hot topic.
Well, Lord, let me look at the list real quick because it was a lot of them, and they were all really good topics.
That's true.
Let's see. I shared one, but we'll wait to that. So I guess what the first one was, Bristol, a good race weekend in all three series, is the Gen 7 car tires or the track. That one kind of really will kick off what we've got in store for the show today, because I'm very opinionated on what we just witnessed this past weekend. And my colleagues.
Chris, real quick, I added a couple of there. I added, did the PBJ do what was expected? That was our second bullet point. I just kind of lumped it in here, along with should the date be moved. So.
Yeah, no, Eric Estep kind of come out with the video right after the race, and it summed up, I think, what most of us race fans were feeling. This is not a NASCAR problem. This is a Bristol problem. And I'm not sure changing the date or anything like that is going to fix this. We went from a racetrack that was nonstop action to, long green flag pit stops and basically a tire that would last 120 laps versus last year it wouldn't last more than 25 laps. And there's supposedly been no change. I'm not, my other colleagues have gotten on to me because since I've joined this show, I seem to have been a Kyle Larson fan. But let's get things real straight. I will say here that at least Kyle Larson won because the announcers really didn't have much more to talk about. And what I mean by that is when you have a weekend that's dominated 95% by one race car driver, I'm not sure anybody else had fun but him. And it goes back to what Estep said. I don't believe that this is a series problem. I don't even believe that this is a Goodyear problem. I think this is just a manifestation of a racetrack that's similar to Texas, but we've all just been afraid to admit that over the years. There's a reason why they put dirt on this place for 3 years. And it was because the fan count was down. The racing isn't all that great. We took, 5 years ago, before this new car, our short tracks were really some of the best racing around. But our mile and a halves were horrible, and they weren't worth watching. We've somehow become in this paradox where now it's the opposite. And I'm not sure how to get back to where short track racing is great again. And we looked at North Wilkesboro last year with the All-Star race, and we were so happy to be there. We just tuned out the fact that one person pretty much led the whole race and ran away with it. There's got to be something somewhere to either fix the track or make the car where, we can have a short track facility that puts on a great race. I say that it's not a NASCAR problem or a series problem. It does seem to be that this current car doesn't fit well at short tracks. But after this weekend and watching with what the trucks were able to accomplish, which was pretty much a boring race, the Xfinity race was pretty boring. I'm concerned about Bristol in itself. There's a problem, and then there's a big problem, and Bristol right now seems to be the big problem. I'll pass the torch.
Okay. You said you're going to pass to Garen?
Yeah, I'll pass it.
Okay.
I'm actually really happy about that because I am the complete opposite of your opinion about Bristol being the problem. Like you mentioned, it's the short tracks have been an issue in the Gen 7 car. And I mean, we can look at what Denny Hamlin had to say even on his show today, to where it's like NASCAR 10 years ago started saying, hey, let's slow down the cars so that way the cars are nose to tail the whole time. And I mean, he finished second there. He won the race during the tire wear race last season. And then Kyle Larson, he mentioned on Saturday during his win that in the truck series there's no power. And then he mentioned that the next gen car in the Cup Series also needed power. So I mean, when you look at the races, like you mentioned, the All-Star race last season where it was dominated the whole time. You look at what happened. I mean, even for the exhibition race for the Busch Clash, it was dominated the whole time. You can look at Richmond, Bristol, Martinsville, seems to be dominated the whole time. So I don't want to blame Bristol here. I do understand though, because at the beginning of the race, the commentators are saying this is like old Bristol, their nose to tail. To me, it's like a train. It's the same thing you're getting at Daytona, to where they slow down, fuel save because they were afraid to use the tires. Which I mean, in the moment, it's very cool. Like, hey, these drivers have no idea what to expect. But after they figured it out after 50 laps, it made it into a boring race. But I don't want to blame Bristol because I think Bristol can put on a good showing if NASCAR put the right car on there. But overall, the race itself for the weekend, I was not happy with it. I don't know if you guys have seen the Jeff Gluck poll from The Athletic. It's at 19%, 20%. I think it may be one of the lowest ever. And the fans aren't happy, drivers aren't happy, and I think that this is a NASCAR issue, not a Bristol issue.
All right, Jay, it's your turn.
So am I supposed to pick one side or the other since I'm last? Tell you what.
I think I'm going to chime in on this one too. Go ahead.
You said you weren't going to. I knew you wouldn't last, Sharon. No, I'm in the middle of start with I think Chris is right. There are some issues that can be improved upon. However, I don't like the use of the word bad or boring race. If I'm going to use the word bad race, I'm going to go back to Indianapolis in the 2007 or 8. That was a tire issue. Exactly. I mean,
race.
Yeah. And I was there the year before. I was thankful I was there the year before. So that to me is a bad race. Was this the most exciting race? No. You had a driver, whether he's your fan favorite or not, that driver is just dominant and on point right now in anything he gets in. So take that for what it is. You know, that's where Chris, you wanted to say that Bristol was the problem. Garen's kind of saying it's a car problem. I'm going to say it's more of a fan problem. They want to see the old Bristol and pushing and shoving and wrecking. Well, we had that a couple of weeks ago at Martinsville. Then what did they say? Hey, that was embarrassing. That was, a disaster. That wasn't racing. So, yeah, I mean, that's where I come in. Honestly, as much as I'm with Garen, did this race excite me the most ever? No, by no means. And I am kind of a Kyle Larson fan. I very much appreciate his talent and like to see him win and do the things he does. But that, when you whoop somebody that bad, I don't care if it's a fan favorite or not. I'm still not necessarily a favorite of that. But I think back to when Martin Truex did it at Charlotte Motor Speedway. They didn't say, hey, we need to change this track or change the car or whatever. Jeff Burton led all 300 laps at New Hampshire. It happens. It's one race out of 9 or 10, depending on how many races you count this year. That's 10%. It's one race. Let it go. The other thing, I mean, me personally,
we'll go
I know.
around again, Garen.
Okay.
Yeah, you get another shot.
Okay.
I look at, and this makes me kind of some people say not a true race fan. That came up on Dave Moody's show today. I would rather watch a race like this again than I would some of the Daytona and Talladega races. To me, the big pack racing is not real racing. But again, it is what it is, so I enjoy it for what it is. And I guess we're going to go to Sharon. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I got to chime in here because a couple of points, and I'm somewhere in the middle here too, because I do think that there should be some consideration to the track. We used to have a flat track at Bristol, and it gave us some really outstanding racing. They put the bank in at that track, and the racing's never been the same since. I would like to see them go back to that flatter track. And I do think that that's part of the issue that a lot of the problem with the racing. So the other part of this is that Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, there were some drivers that made their way through the pack, raced from the back to the front, and William Byron did it. And did a good job of racing their way through the pack. I would say Hendrick Motorsports has figured out something that nobody else has figured out. And come to Bristol in the next race, I think you're going to see a little bit of difference because teams are going to have figured it out, what they figured out. So I don't think it's necessarily the car. The tire was a really good tire. Ryan Blaney rode on his tires for quite a long time and did pretty well. So I don't think it's the tires. The horsepower, there's a reason why NASCAR is not increasing the horsepower. And Steve O'Donnell responded to Denny Hamlin and his comments about the horsepower. He's saying that they are trying to level the field for all players. You have teams like Hendrick Motorsports that can spend and outspend, but you've got other teams like Rick Ware Racing or maybe Spire Motorsports and some of the smaller teams, Front Row Motorsports, that don't have those same kinds of funds. And so they're keeping the horsepower at a level that's going to be equal for everybody and make it a more equal and level playing field. And that's NASCAR saying that. That's not me saying that. That's NASCAR saying that. That's why they're doing it. And if you want to increase the cost of doing business, that's what increasing horsepower is going to do. It's going to increase the cost of doing business. So again, Steve O'Donnell's words, not mine. So I will just put that out there that I really don't think I do think there's a fan problem because going back to the day when a lot of people are saying, I want to go back to the old days when we had all this great racing. Well, you know what happened back in the old days? You had one or two cars that were on the lead lap at the end of the race. That was the good old days. So what you saw this weekend was the good old days. That's what we used to see. And I think fans are also used to seeing every race being all this excitement and everything. If you looked at what happened on the racetrack, and I will say Fox did show a lot of what was happening on the track. There was a lot of good racing going on the track. Like I said, you had Ryan Blaney working his way through the field. You had William Byron did an amazing job of working his way through the field and making it from the back to the front. So I think the racing is there. I think there are teams that have figured it out. We still have teams that haven't figured it out yet. So I think the Gen 7 car is really in its heyday. And Jay will tell you, I've been saying this since the beginning of the season. I think that there are good things happening with the Gen 7 car. Is it perfect? No. Is there still room for improvement? Yes, because it's an evolution that's happening. And NASCAR is doing everything they can to work through that evolution. Goodyear is doing everything they can to work through that evolution. So I think we need to look at the positives and the good things that are happening with this Gen 7 car and wait for the evolution to take its process. So that's where I'm at on this. So Chris, it's your turn. I'll have more on the next go around.
I blame Kyle Larson.
Pardon me?
I blame Kyle Larson.
They figured something out, didn't they?
Well, I mean, Hendrick Motorsports has definitely got something for them that I don't think others have. I think that JGR does, and it's kind of like last year's same song. Where the hell is Penske, right? We haven't seen them all year long, other than Josh Berry, which is the R&D car. Obviously, they're hitting on all P's and Q's over at Hendrick Motorsports, and JGR has the advantage, as you said. By the time we wind up back at Bristol again, hopefully there'll be some other contenders that have actually caught up or surpassed the advantages right now that we're seeing from the top Chevy team. But let's not make it what it's not. The fact of it is Chevrolet and Hendrick Motorsports is a mile ahead of everybody else right now in NASCAR. And until, it used to be if somebody got a certain bit of advantage, we started hearing, well, we need aero change, or we need this, or we need that. You would hear Ford camps complain. You would hear Pontiac complain against Chevrolet. You would hear the Dodge camp complain. Now the aero has been basically taken out. We're left with, well, what is the other person doing? Well, you're not supposed to be doing much of anything with this car. So, where Hendrick is able to get such an advantage, I guess only time will tell. But unfortunately, until we figure out really what's going on with this short track car, look, we can cough up that the Truck Series wasn't as good and the Xfinity Series wasn't as good. And the one thing that I heard Kyle Larson say about the Xfinity Series car was, at least it could go when he pushed the gas pedal, and that's something that, it's alarming, because we've heard that the trucks can't, they don't go fast. The Cup cars are like crate engines. So, you have to keep them wound up. I've not had really much of an issue at all with saying the Xfinity Series wasn't a good race or the truck race. This weekend, it just kind of fell upon that, all of it seemed to be kind of lackluster. And maybe, as Jay said, maybe this is just, a weekend where, everything just didn't play out right. Or we're putting a racetrack that maybe once had its heyday into this imaginary place that's going to create this bull ring style racing. I'm not sure that that's what Bristol is these days. So I don't know. I'm ready to hear what y'all have to say.
Okay, Garen.
For what you just said, Chris, I wholeheartly agree. I mean, whenever you look at the stands, you look at it compared to even 10 years ago, they could still bring in 80 to 90,000 people. I mean, the stadium can hold 140, 150,000. I think. Yeah, like you can clearly see the product isn't there, so the fans aren't showing up. So yeah, I believe that what you guys have said about Bristol, about, people go there expecting it to be one thing, or people watch it on TV expecting it to be one thing. It just isn't. And this weekend, it was another one of those. Kyle Larson, I mean, what you guys are saying, Kyle Larson, it's just what he does. He's just great at it. And I mean, we saw it at Homestead, Miami in his win as well. And that's a completely different track. It's one of NASCAR's best tracks with the cars. But I mean, he can win when it's tire wear. He can win in like any type of condition, which is just really weird for a driver to be able to do all forms of competition in that way. But something I wanted to touch on was the domination from the weekend by him, because we are talking about Hendrick Motorsports. They're a mile ahead, and I agree. And last weekend, William Byron did that at Darlington. But does it not become a concern whenever it seems last weekend a driver dominated the whole weekend until the green flag pit stops took him out because of the dirty air, not able to pass, and then the following weekend. So if you're just a fan who's like, I'm gonna tune in for these first 2 weeks or or for these 2 weeks, I'm just a casual fan, casual viewer, and you go to watch these races and you go, what is this? This sucks. It's like I'm just watching them run in a loop. I mean, this is why I can't get friends to want to watch NASCAR. This is why I can't get my family to want to watch NASCAR. They'll watch my show because it's 30 minutes long, but it's not 3 hours long. And my biggest discrepancy is NASCAR was talking about, like you mentioned, Sharon, that it's NASCAR saying it's a money problem. They want to keep everything fair for the smaller teams. And I'm sorry that I'm yapping so much here, and I'm going, but if NASCAR talks about wanting to keep teams to where it's an equal playing field, why are charters so expensive? Why is it that they'll hold practice randomly at one track and no practice at another when it seems, hey, these smaller teams like Aspire, a Front Row, I mean, even 2311, whenever they first entered in a couple of years ago, they could have used the help at these shorter at these type of tracks that you're not going to. We see practice at Daytona every single year. We see practice at Talladega. Why do we need practice here? I'm just saying it. You put your foot down and you go. I'm not a driver, but I mean, that's just kind of the gist of it. So I'll stop there. But to me, a money problem, I don't think that's the case. But I know NASCAR has their answers, and sadly, we will never know the true answers to what they actually have to tell us.
Okay, Jay.
I think you did hit on something, some very interesting points there, Garen, of they say that it's a money thing. And that would be one of my answers, would be to give a little more freedom, open the box up. I'm not looking for an outlaw series where it's do whatever you want, but give the crew chief some playroom to work on the car. But there again, then the top teams, such as Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, they're going to spend thousands of dollars working on air guns or this and that. And you run into the same problem. Who can outspend who? And that still happens. And here's where I look at that when it comes to Kyle Larson. The cream is going to rise to the top. I mean, there is no way to avoid that. He is a very talented driver. And it got brought up, and I never really thought about this when talking about, somebody brought up today on Sirius XM of how Chip Ganassi must feel after the situation where Kyle Larson got suspended. His sponsor said, hey, we're not going to back him. That Hendrick did, but he did it with his own company. I mean, I knew his company was on the car. I get that. But whether or not that was because they could get no other sponsors, I think now he has gotten some other sponsors, which is great. But Hendrick was one that stepped out and said, hey, I see talent and I know he can drive. I'll back him all the way. So thankful to Rick Hendrick for that, because we've got to reap the rewards of it. And if you're a fan of any other style of racing, dirt track racing, sprint car racing, whatever it be, we know Kyle Larson can do it in whatever he's in. The other thing that, and I know, Sharon, you had this on I think the same grouping. NASCAR is trying to find some things, the PJ1, the resin, the different things they're doing there. What I heard on the morning drive on Sirius XM was an interesting thought of, they were saying, well, move the date back into March and get the colder weather, because then we'll have what we had last year. Here again, I understand the thought, but to me, that's the fan issue. That's their answer. But now you're trying to control the weather. You're trying to control the race and dictate the race. What happens when NASCAR throws a caution they don't like? Oh, NASCAR's dictating the race. They're not letting it play out naturally. This weekend at Bristol, it played out naturally. Kyle whooped them. That's the natural of the race. And yet they're not happy with that. But on one end, then they're not happy when NASCAR supposedly tries to dictate the race and control it. So that's where I get frustrated from the fan side.
Yeah, I agree, Jay. Everybody's got the same car. It's the Gen 7 car. Everybody has the same issues to deal with. Everybody has the same learning curve. Some are on a faster learning curve. Some are on a slower learning curve. I get that. Hendrick Motorsports has more affiliates. that they can lean on to get feedback and data and all of that information. So it makes sense that they're the first ones out of the gate that have figured this out. So people are struggling with the Gen 7 car. Cole Custer came into the series this year and he said, I know it's going to be a rough year for me. I haven't figured out the Gen 7 car. So until they're able to figure it out, it's going to be a rough year for Cole Custer. Drivers coming in from the Xfinity series take a while to make that adjustment. Some do it faster, some do it slower. That's what happens. I don't think it's the car. I just don't think it's the car. When you've got some teams that are figuring it out and others haven't yet, I don't think it's the car. I don't think it's the horsepower because, again, some teams have figured it out, some teams have not. I don't think it's the tire. I think Goodyear's doing their diligence on the tire. I don't think that we have to, the PJ, I said PBJ, I don't know what I was thinking, peanut butter and jelly, I guess. But PJ1, I don't think that that was it was a factor. It took a long time for it to come in because they relayed the PJ1 and they had to work it out before they could really get down on that lower lane. But they did. Everybody had the same thing to deal with, and they did. I do know, I forget where I saw this now. It might be Matt Weaver, it might be somebody else, but somebody posted on social media that Bristol Motor Speedway is looking at the track and considering making some changes to the track. And I said, yay, because that's what they need to do. That track has not been the same since they put the banking in. They need to take that banking out and let those guys race that track the way it was. But then there's going to be a learning curve for that too, because there's a whole new generation of drivers now that are going to have to go through that learning curve. So to me, I do think, I don't think they, the later race, the fall race is a better race because weather conditions are more likely to be warmer. They had a warm race on Sunday though, and you guys are saying you didn't like the race because it was dominated by one driver. So I don't know that they necessarily need to move the date. I would be okay if they did, but I don't think they have to do that. I think they need to change that track. For me, it's all about that track. If they change that track, I think you're going to get better racing. And I do think that we had a lot of good races at Homestead. You had somebody who dominated there, William Byron. But again, I thought we saw some racing back and forth in other parts of the track. So I do think that, and we did see William Byron. I thought he did a great job of racing his way from the back to the front. So some drivers are doing it. It can be done. They just have to figure it out how to do it. And they haven't figured it out yet. And I do know that Bristol's looking at making some changes to the track. And I was excited for that because I think that will make a difference in the racing there. Do we need to go around again, guys?
No, I think I'm good.
We're good? Okay. So, Jay, do you want to pick the next one?
Well, I will. I'll kind of tie it in. And I know, Sharon, I had to go back and actually watch the end of the race on my recording. But the question of the Fox broadcast being brought up of missing the final lap. And I know I can speak to this from an announcer side. But the other part of it, that kind of ties into what fans think from my perspective. And Sharon, you already kind of hit on it. Are they showing that one guy up front dominating, which I know they have sponsors and that there's a part to that. But do they also then, if need be, show the action throughout the field? And did they do a good job of that is what I would tie into it.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, you know, I could get on the bandwagon with a lot of other people. I think the announcing the commentating has really not been up to standard. And I love Mike Joy, and I've heard him. You know, my first Daytona 500 was 1981, probably 3 months old. My dad had me in his lap, feeding me a bottle while he watched Benny Parsons win the Daytona 500. Right. So I've been around racing my entire life. I've loved racing. Um, the uh, the idea. I think I lost track somewhere. What was the thing, Jay?
Oh, let me put it back up.
Well, yeah, of course they did, and sorry to fall off there. So I've heard all kinds of different broadcasters, and from the time and age of Ken Squire and Chris Economaki and Ned Jarrett to where we are today, even with DW. I mean, DW had a way of just being personal with you during the broadcast. You know, Clint Boyer, he's really good at being, you know, sarcastic and kind of picking up the wing. Harvick, I think, is a little bit too serious. I love him in studio, like with his own show and stuff, but trying to carry Mike Joy as what DW had done, Kevin nor Jeff Gordon nor anybody else in there that they've tried since DW's left has really fit that role. I think Larry Mack is always got the guy that got pushed out that is really, really good at keeping you in focus and what's going on throughout the race. That's, you know, there's so many little McNuggets and stuff that he's come up with, and they seem to turn to him when they need kind of a bailout. This broadcasting team just isn't working. I think that we could get better, but you know, you look at it all the way down. I think this is a sports problem because we're not, you know, our best broadcasters aren't at the top of the field anymore. They're replaced by former drivers and stuff. And look, like I said, when you're saying Ned Jarrett and DW, it's worked in the past, but it's not necessarily working right now. I will take you back to when Tony Stewart filled in on that third broadcasting wheel like a couple of years ago. Tony was amazing in the booth, and him and Harvick or Gordon, whoever it was, I think it was Harvick that was his first year, or maybe it was Boyer. Anyway, it was Mike, Clint, and Tony was the fill-in announcer. Like, I really feel like Tony could carry the broadcast. If you go and you listen to Formula One or you listen to Sirius XM, there's just such a big difference between how they carry the race. Did the guys get carried away in the booth as well? I didn't hear the Credit One last lap, sponsored by Credit One or whatever last lap. So I think they got kind of lost in the dysfunction that's been going on in the booth. But did we really think that Harvick was going to be able to be like a DW style broadcaster? I don't think so. And neither was Gordon. So if we had that one strong BP, you know, Benny Parsons or Darrell Waltrip, we just need a stronger voice, I think, there to help carry on. And I'm not sure how much longer Mike Joy is going to be able to do this. As you get older, your cognitive balance starts falling off. You say things and you don't even realize what you're saying. And now I think they're into the position where they're correcting each other on air. And the one thing that I've known with other broadcasters is even when they make mistakes, the best thing to do is just like tell them off camera or something, because it really, and when you try to correct them in camera, they kind of get this pause, this ghost in the headlight look, like I did what? And yeah, you're saying the guy's wrong name. So if you kind of let that just flow out natural, it's a lot easier to keep going. But when you have somebody who corrects you on air, it definitely puts you in like this timeout feeling. As a broadcaster, I'm just going off something that I relate to myself. We need a stronger broadcasting team. We need a team that can relate. I don't know where we find a DW or a Benny Parsons or a Ken Squire even in this day and age. It is sad. I think one of the guys that from TNT, what was his name? He called the Dale Earnhardt race when he won in 2000. In 2001, the July race. What was his name? Alan Bestwick.
Alan Bestwick.
I mean, come on, let's get him. He's not doing anything. Like, put him in the booth. Let's get a real broadcaster in there that can carry the booth. I'll pass it.
Okay, Darren, I know you're biting at the bit.
I am. So Alan Bestwick, I loved him growing up. So I was happy to hear his name mentioned. Yeah, Fox is what I grew up on. So no one in my family were big racers. It took me until I turned 18 to go to my first NASCAR race. And so whenever I got into NASCAR, it was through video games and it was through watching it on television. And Fox was my favorite time of the year for NASCAR. I loved listening to Mike Joy, Larry Mack, and then DW. It was just a perfect trifecta of voices in the booth. And when I listen to the races nowadays, Mike Joy, you can tell he's lost some of it. And like Chris mentioned, yeah, they are correcting themselves. I commentated back in high school for high school softball. I never corrected what my color commentator had to say, and he never corrected what I said, because that's just a part of it. You don't do it. And when you bring in two former racers into the booth, and I'm not saying that they don't do their jobs correctly, because it's different for each person. But whenever you have two drivers and Mike Joy talking and they can talk over each other and they're joking the whole time, it makes you lose a feeling of, oh yeah, there's a race going on. But with those two, my biggest problem, and I don't know if this is just for me as someone who's a very the way it used to be type of fan, to where I like the idea of having a crew chief, driver, play-by-play, to where you have someone who knows the analytical side of it, someone who knows the driving side of it, and someone who will tell you how it is. And that's why I would love to see Larry Mack back in there. Now, obviously, it's his life. It's whatever Fox wants. But the team I'm excited for is Amazon. I'm excited to see Dale Jr. I'm excited to see Adam Alexander, Steve Letarte. Those are the people that I'm excited to hear. And it sucks that it's only for 5 races. I wish it was for as many Fox does. I think 9 or 10, even 12 races. But for the last lap being missed, I will cut them some slack, just because, think about it this way. We've all watched a baseball game where the score is 9-0, 9-1, and they are just talking about old stories, old friends, old players, old interest. And yeah, and I mean, it's just, I'm not going to blame them. It's their job. And Mike Joy shared on Twitter in a response. Someone said, someone was upset about the way the race ended. And Mike Joy said, in all of racing on TV and radio, you'll hear announcers hoping anyone will catch the runaway leader, whoever it is, and make a race out of it. Our call would probably have been very similar, no matter who the two drivers involved were. And he was talking about the fact that they seem to be upset that Ryan Blaney wasn't winning or something like that. I don't know. But Mike Joy is now starting to respond to fans, because a lot of fans are upset about Fox. And I mean, fans are going down to the fact of, why is the coloring on the TV different on this camera and this camera? Like, guys, we are reaching way too far. But Fox at some point will need to clean it up. And I hate that NASCAR allowed the agreement to go on for so long. And I mean, they just got rid of their head director, I believe, or producer for NASCAR on Fox a couple of weeks ago. And I know that it probably won't happen this season, but next season there needs to be changes. And I think we've heard that for the past 2 or 3 years, but I think the first step is finally getting a analytical person in the booth instead of 2 drivers and a play-by-play.
All right, Jay, it's back to you.
All right, I've been taking deep breaths here because y'all have hit on some things of exposed nerves for me, I guess, if you will. So one thing, though, of throughout the day on SiriusXM as I was driving home, the phrase "real race fan" kept coming up. And that's one of those, to me, if you're a real race fan, you don't care about the announcers. You don't care about the color of the screen. That was a good one, Garen, that got brought up. I've heard that throughout the year. I feel like there are some people out there who are watching NASCAR and watching the broadcast just to pick it apart. They don't even care about the race. That is their whole goal, is to try and find things to pick apart about that. The one thing, if anybody's going to have a complaint about the last lap, and I say I did come home and I rewatched it, it should be Credit One, because they're the sponsor, and that did not go up. and there again, I'm sure off camera, they're saying, hey, we paid for this spot. We should have had it. As far as calling the last lap, Chris is going to follow me here. Maybe he can put some more input. That is one of those is a tough call. How do you call a last lap of, well, he gained a tenth of a second, so now it's only a 9-point-something second lead or 300 yards. I mean, the race was going to finish as it was, because if the white flag comes out, the caution is out, it's over anyway. Yeah, there wasn't going to be a major drastic change. There was no particular battle even, I guess. They did cover the one of somebody had gained the one spot, and that's what they talked about. So for me as a broadcaster and as a race announcer, and this is where I was going with that, yeah, if I'm calling a race and the leader is out front by that far, I'm going to say, hey, so-and-so's out front by still a half a straightaway. Here's the battle. Let me talk about second and third or fourth and fifth or even seventh or eighth, and Chris will attest to this. There's people that would be like, why are you talking about seventh and eighth? There's only 8 cars on the track. I'm like, because that's where the action was. First is out front by 10 car lengths. Second and third are a car length apart, not making any moves. That's where the action is, So, but I do think a mistake was made. And I say that from the sponsor vantage point. Credit one should have been up there. But as far as actually calling the race, like I said, I mean, what more can you do than say, same as last lap, Kyle Larson is whooping him. I mean, how many times can you say that?
Yeah, he did put a whooping on the field. Chris?
Yeah, just, I don't know. I'll go back to the real race fan. In some points, I think some people do look to just pick apart. But, I feel like this year's kind of been a lack of storyline. And maybe that's because of certain drivers. I mean, the storyline has been dominance, right? If we had one specific storyline to pick, it would be, well, Christopher Bell went 2 in a row, tried for the third peat. Kyle Larson's won 2 out of 3. Denny Hamlin won 2 in a row, or 2 out of 4. And Denny Hamlin won 2 in a row. So, the real race fan is probably doing their best to, enjoy something about the weekend, right? I'm a real race fan. I consider myself a real race fan. I watch every single weekend. I want it to be pleasing. I want to have a good time. I know a lot of people, wow, I seen Kyle Larson was leading 200 and something laps. I just turned it off. Look, I'm scared to death to turn it off. If I turn it off, then all chaos is going to break out. So I feel like I am the real race fan that sits there. And unfortunately, when we don't have positive storylines to talk about, like, the fact that Ricky Stenhouse looked at like that team had a little bit of speed this weekend. Those are easily drawn out by, the quote, real race fan, right? So I'm not sure, on the broadcasting side, if we can fix this year what we've got going on. Of course, as Darian said just a minute ago, we're going to be going up to the Amazon broadcasting here pretty soon, and we'll be able to judge there. And NBC's kind of had their own little thing going for a couple of years. I swear, if y'all don't like the broadcasting, do what we do around here. We just turn it onto DVR, and then we sync it with the Sirius XM radio, right? And then we watch it that way. Plus, nowadays, we got so many different ways of actually just watching the broadcast without any commentating with what Max has offered and others. Trust me, we're going to figure out ways to get around terrible broadcasting. And when Fox gets that fixed and they bring in somebody, I just really don't know who's out there that could, magically fix an issue that has been going on since, the departure of some of the best in the business. But we'll see. And, only hope for the best, because I want the product to be the best that it can be. I want the guys in the booth to be knowledgeable and to carry the sport, even during boring races. You watch a Formula One race, and somehow or another they're midway through the race, and you've had the same leader, and the announcer is just going ecstatic for something that's going on in 12th place. And so I think that we can adapt to that and create more excitement for the racing that's going on in the field. As Jay said, and I want to end it with this, there are so many times in B mains and heat races where I'm not even worried about the first place car. The first place car's probably checked out 3/10 on the field. What I'm looking for is that guy who's racing, trying to stay out the B main. That's where the race is, fourth through seventh. And so, you can't bag the guys because they missed the end of the lap call there. If they were, technically talking about something that was going on in the back of the field, or maybe a racing for position, though they did drop the ball by not calling the sponsor. So with that, I think I pretty much said what I need to.
Okay, Garen.
Well, yeah, Chris, most everything you said, I agree with. It's also I believe it's not even Fox with NASCAR. I believe it's Fox in general, just as a company when it comes to what sports they want to market, because they picked up the IndyCar licensing this season and they have done a phenomenal job putting out different advertisements, and not just as an overall, I remember for the Daytona 500 during the Super Bowl, it was clips of old races and clips of old racers. And why? Because they're not here anymore. If you see Jeff Gordon, he's wearing that Hendrick Motorsports vest at the end of a race, typically in victory lane with one of his drivers. If you see Kevin Harvick, he's up in the booth. It's that Fox needs to do a better job of marketing the sport, and that's something NASCAR, when they signed off on the agreement, they knew, because I guarantee you Fox and NASCAR talked about it, like, yep, this is what we'll do, and NASCAR's like, all right, sounds good to us, and that's something on NASCAR's end. That's not Fox's end, that's NASCAR's end. But yeah, with the fans who watch the broadcast, because I will admit, when I'm watching it, and let's say because typically my desk is here, my TV's right in front of me, I'll be watching the race and putting notes down, and I'll be like, oh, that was weird. The commentator said something off. That wasn't right. And then I just go on with my day. And, I'm like, okay, I know what it is. But something else is a lot of fans get upset about a storyline that the commentators don't follow. I saw a tweet earlier today, and I never like to mention a hate tweet or something, but somebody was upset because the booth did not mention Ross Chastain cutting through the field to finish in the top 10. And to me, yeah, that was a great run by Chastain, but let's be honest, the major storyline of the weekend was the 5-team, what had happened prior to entering the weekend, and then the fact that Kyle Larson won. It's one of those, the story is right there in front of you and you just follow it. And as someone who's a journalist, someone who's going to college right now to be a journalist, I see that and I understand. And that's where the ears perk up. That's where the eyes are. That's where the clicks come from. So while the weekend broadcast wasn't the best at the end, I think overall they did what they could. And this is coming from someone who's like, the moment I was most excited for during the race was at the end of stage one, whenever Priest was racing not to be a lap down or to get the lucky dog. Yeah, that was an exciting moment for me, and that's where I wish the commentators were exciting, because that was action, and the commentators weren't exciting there. And even the cameras didn't follow it, but that was something that was going on. But I rest my case there. I can't really say too much about Fox right now.
Okay, Jay.
I can. No. There is some valid points of, can they do better? Yes. But did they talk about Ross Chastain? Yes. And just as Sharon mentioned when we came on, there were some, basically it's always to rebuke the story of, well, there wasn't any passing. Ty Gibbs had a good run. They talked about that, and it's been much needed. Chase Briscoe having a good run. And then they hit on Ryan Blaney, William Byron, and Ross Chastain. Byron went from 26th up to 6th. Ross Chastain from 35th to 7th. And they did talk about it. Could they have covered a little more? Now, you talked about the Ryan Preece. And again, I know they talked about it because I remember that, and he had to do it multiple times because they said, here's that fight again. Did they show that car, or did they follow Larson, once he got by? that's again of what are you going to cover? I think they could do a better job, like you said, of staying on it or getting on Priest's car and showing it as Larson's coming, whereas they just did for a couple seconds or 30 seconds maybe of while it was happening. So they certainly could have, because like you said, other than that, what are you going to say? Kyle Larson's whooping them. So I want to go back to something that was talked about earlier, too, of the making a mistake. When I started working dirt tracks, Ben Shelton, who's one of the top, in my opinion, top late model dirt track coverage people, works with Flow Racing. I witnessed him, and he didn't have somebody to correct him. He did it himself. He said something wrong, and he said, "Oh, I screwed that up," and he kept going and never missed a beat. You know, you guys talked about that. If you start calling somebody out and pointing it out, you get that pause or awkwardness of, yeah, that's bad broadcasting. Like I said, I witnessed him. I was just standing behind him in the booth. He's like, "Yeah, I screwed that up. This is the right thing," and went on. And I mean, just didn't stop and address it. He said, "Yeah, screwed it up. Moving on."
That's what you do.
So I've tried to hold to that. If mistakes get made, especially for me of not being originally from Mississippi, some of the town names, especially when they come up out of Louisiana, man, I know I butcher the snot out of them. I can't help it. Somebody comes up to correct me, I'll like, "All right, thank you," and I'll do my best with my Minnesota accent to represent the Cajun community of Louisiana. It doesn't go over real well. Yeah, it doesn't go over real well. But my biggest thing, and I didn't call into Dave Moody today, but for all the ones that were calling in with the real race fan issues and watching the broadcast, I wanted to be like, hey, if you're a real race fan, you'd be at the racetrack watching it yourself, and then you got no complaints about who's telling you what because you're watching it yourself.
And you know, Jay, there's something to be said for that, because one of the callers that called in during Godfather Moody's segment said, "I was at the racetrack. I thought the racing was fantastic." So I think there is a difference between when you're at the racetrack. I know what you're going to say. When you're at the racetrack and what you're watching on TV. And go ahead, Chris.
Well, I mean, I've got a perfect example. October, Talladega last year, they went 4 wide for 10 laps. For 10 laps, they were 4 wide. Nobody moved a muscle. I thought it was so awesome. Everybody in the stands stood up and was praising and hollering and hooting. I got home to people saying, "Man, that race must have sucked." I said, "What are you talking about?" Like they were 4 wide for like 10 laps. They were just side by side. Oh, well, there wasn't no racing. I mean, you know, you're right. Sometimes when you're there, you get one perspective versus TV. It's a totally different. I didn't understand where people were saying that it was a terrible race. I was there. The fans in the stands were screaming because these guys were just like nose to tail for 10 laps. Nobody budged or moved a muscle. They all stayed in line. They were within inches of each other's, catastrophe, just a blink of an eye away. But no, these guys were coordinated and they were able to put on a magnificent show for the fans that were in the stands. Now, need be said, of course, when the camera's only at the front 4, you don't see the jockeying and the switching of positions and the one row moving versus the other row from the back, unless that angled camera is showing that. So I could see where, fans at home said, "Well, man, that wasn't worth anything because I didn't get to see any real racing." There again, as Jay said, when you buy the ticket and you sit in the stands, you're going to have a completely different perspective one way or the other.
Sharon, can I tell you this? And this isn't about calling myself a real fan. I'll just tell you what kind of fan I am. I go to a race. I watch the race, enjoy it. Driving home through the night, I listen to the replay if it's on Sirius XM. Totally different race with the same result. I get home, I'll watch the recording on TV that I've recorded of the same race. I know what happened for the third time. Totally different race with the same outcome because it's all about the perspective that's being presented to you. So I understand that where some fans, and that's why they're saying, well, Fox isn't representing it. Well, if you want your own perspective, The only way you're going to get that is to be at the track.
Exactly. And I do wish, though, I will say this, I do wish we could find the announcers that could see it like the fans at the track are seeing it. Because let's face it, they're at the track. And if they could see the race like the fans at the track are seeing the race and convey that on their broadcast, I think that would be fantastic. So, Garen, we haven't given you a chance in this. So what do you want to add to this?
Sorry,
No?
I muted myself. So, like I mentioned, the first race I went to was when I was 18, and it was the Atlanta Motor Speedway, the repaved, the first race that they'd done where they turned it into a super speedway. And I thought the race was amazing. And I remember getting home, everyone said it was amazing. So for my first race, I thought, oh, so if you enjoy the race at the track, the people who watched the broadcast enjoyed the race. And then the next race I went to was the tire wear race at Bristol last spring. And everyone was complaining that, well, where was the racing? Because they had to keep throwing cautions. I'm like, it was awesome because like you guys mentioned for this race, so many fans at the track said you can watch one car and watch them go throughout the whole field, just dice them up the whole time. And it's fun to watch. And that's something I enjoyed at the track. So yeah, I agree with what has been said to where if you want to enjoy the race, save up the money, go to the track. And I understand a lot of people, they don't have a track near them or that they just don't have the money to do it. But I think if you are willing to complain about the broadcast and go, hey, the race was terrible, the racing was boring, the racing just wasn't good, then you need to go see it in person for yourself. Yes. And then talk about it after the fact.
Yeah. In fact, I think I used the words. I watched the race with my brother every Sunday, and I was using the words, oh, wow, watch him slicing and dicing. They were like threading the needle. And even the broadcasters were saying that threading the needle to get by some of these cars. And especially in the, when they were going through the lap down cars. Mm-hmm. So there was some really good racing, I thought, going on during this race. And they were slicing and dicing on the track. So anyway, whose turn is it? I think it's your turn, Darren.
So the question I enjoyed the most, I guess, do we need to go in order of how you sent them, or do I just pick one?
No, just pick one.
Okay, well, in that case, me and my girlfriend actually just had this argument before we got on, but it's Cup drivers racing in the Xfinity or the Craftsman Truck Series.
Okay, this is an age-old conversation. Jay, I'm going to go to you this time to go first.
Yeah, well, and I'm the one that threw that up, and I've always defended that of the drivers being able to, if they so choose. I know there's been some issues in the past of the dominance, and honestly, the reason I put it up there, if you're on that side of it, of the Cup guys shouldn't be in the other series, you have the argument when it comes to somebody like Kyle Larson or Kyle Busch in his heyday. I understand that. But Sharon and I have been there, and you talk to the other drivers, these young drivers, they do love it. Do they love getting their butts kicked like they did? Probably not. But they also get to talk to these drivers, watch them, drive behind them. When they get lapped for the third time, get in line behind them and try and see what is he doing that I'm not, So the value of it is there. I was okay going back to the days of, they went as far back as Mark Martin. And when I first really got involved in racing, Kevin Harvick and Carl Edwards were running full-time both series. It was when Harvick took over the Cup ride for Dale Earnhardt when he passed. So he was contracted for the Xfinity for that year, or nationwide, I think it was at that time. But then also Carl Edwards did it. I liked it because honestly, a lot of times they had to come in and didn't get to qualify the car, which meant they came from the back because they had to go to the back for a driver change. Somebody else had qualified the car. I was okay with that. Some fans weren't happy with it. NASCAR addressed it and they put the limit on it. I understood that. Whether I agreed with it or not, I understood it, respected it. They felt it was still a little too much and they narrowed it down. I think we're at a good place right now. there again it's about the fans, because if the driver shows up for the 5 races or how many they can do and they don't win, then fans are okay with it. It's long as they don't win, as long as their driver beats your favorite driver. And that's where I get frustrated. Like, yeah, they're talented. They run on Sundays at the Cup level. That's why. And again, I appreciate the talent. And I know from other drivers, they say, hey, it helps us. Again, if we want to be the best, we got to beat the best. We can if they're not there. We think we're good and they show up and whoop us. Well, maybe we're not as good as we thought. We got more work to do. So, and I was thinking this with the talking about going to NASCAR with all these problems. I think about what I thought of earlier today as I was driving home was, how come you're not calling Penske? Kyle Larson, Hendrick Motorsports is dominating. Call Penske. Tell them, hey, get your guys together. Get your crews together. Call these teams, because that's who it's on. You got to get better to catch them.
Okay, Chris, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm so glad we're past Cup drivers coming in and taking the money basically from these younger guys. In order to have a strong, solid series, you need to have drivers that make names for themselves in each of these series. You have the Matt Craftons and the Justin Allgaiers who take control of their series, and they do really well there, and they've made a name for themselves. They have some place that they can call home. And we also have, the youngins that come in and get these rides. We watched Ross Chastain go from, a subsidiary truck in a Xfinity team that, basically, ran on a penny budget, JD Davis. And you were able to see these guys flourish and prosper in this new style that we have, where you keep the dominant Cup drivers out of the series. I don't want to go back to Carl Edwards running for two championships, right? And you can't. Even if they did the 5-race unlimited, they would the limited 5 races. There is not a single Cup driver that can run during the championship series, which is 10 races. So it gives these guys, of course, a chance to run against a Kyle Busch or against a Kyle Larson, and they can kind of size up where they are. But for the most part, it's left alone, and these guys are able to go out and make a name for themselves. When you look at F1 and you look at Xfinity Series, and you see Xfinity Series still carries a larger American audience than F1, you can only think one reason why, because we're not dominated week in, week out with a Cup driver racing in Xfinity, basically beating up on a bunch of kids. And so I don't want to change a thing. I think we're at a modest, perfect yin and yang. And anything outside of what we're already doing, it would be bad for the sport. Look at what Eric Almirola has been able to do, right? We all know Eric Almirola is not washed up. He had no problem getting in an Xfinity car and being a dominant Xfinity driver, just as Justin Allgaier is. But were these guys ever going to be a superstar in the Cup Series? Absolutely not. So, it's good that the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series, they have some stomping ground guys. Stuart Friesen. When you get the Truck Series, the first thing you're going to want to do is beat Stuart Friesen and that kid in the 99 truck, or Ty Majeski or something like that. And then you're going to get in the Xfinity Series, and you're going to want to beat Junior Motorsports. You're going to want to beat that Justin Allgaier, or you're going to want to beat, Cole Custer, who was, I think, doing a magnificent job in the Xfinity Series. I understand the Call to Cup Series is where he wants to be, but it was great having him week in, week out in the Xfinity Series, kind of duking it out with the guys. Cole's never going to be a dominant superstar in the Cup Series, but can he be in the Xfinity Series? Absolutely. So as long as we're getting this level playing field and we're keeping the Cup drivers from dominating each and every week, I'm perfectly fine. We don't need to change a thing.
Okay, Darren, what are your thoughts? And then I am going to have a few comments.
So you guys mentioned the drivers, and the drivers want to see how they perform against themselves. A couple of weeks ago, Ty Majeski joined my show and talked about, because I believe it was before the Martinsville weekend, and I'd asked him about Kyle Busch in Atlanta, and I'd asked him about Kyle Larson before Homestead Miami, and something that he mentioned to me was that they enjoy when they come down. They enjoy when these top drivers come down because it gives them, like you guys mentioned, a chance to see how they stack up. I mean, Ty Majeski is the reigning Truck Series champion, and I mean, Kyle Busch was dominant in Atlanta. We saw Kyle Larson perform very well at Homestead Miami. So obviously, there's a reason why we have Trucks, Xfinity, and then the Cup Series as your A-level series, and I enjoy seeing the drivers go down to the smaller series, but I'm sorry that we're not going to have any arguments tonight, because I think we're all in agreement on this, at least us three, that NASCAR has found the sweet spot. The drivers will go down there. I know that Hendrick Motorsports does their jobs with Junior Motorsports and Inspire in the Truck Series to let their drivers go down there and run races, because you know what? It brings fans to the track, to the smaller series, and it gives the drivers more time on track in a world and age and that we just don't have as much practice. And I think it's a really mutual agreement between everybody, but I think it works out well.
Okay. I agree. I think that we have found the sweet spot, and I like it where it is right now. You remember this, Jay, when we interviewed Eric Jones, and he said, to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And the other thing I love about Eric Jones, this was a question I asked him about Chicagoland Speedway, is that, all week long, everybody was complaining about the bump over in turn 3, how difficult it was to navigate that bump. And it was a challenge for a lot of the drivers. And so Eric Jones won that race. So I asked him, everybody's been talking about this. How did you work your way through that? He said, everybody we can't change the track. The track is a bump in turn 3. So we've got to figure out how to get around that bump. And I just made up my mind I was going to figure out how to get around that bump. But he also said, when we interviewed him about the top drivers coming down into the lower tier series, he said the same thing that Ty Majeski said. We love it when these guys come down into this series, and because we get to follow them, we get to observe them, we get to ask them questions off the track. It gives them that chance to learn from them. Now, I will say, Sal Segala, when we were doing the review recordings earlier tonight, I asked him this question, and he said a lot of the drivers will say publicly, they'll say that, but privately, they are upset that if they're going for owner's points or anything like that, they lose out on points when a driver comes down from the Cup Series. So I see that side of it as well, but that's why NASCAR found the sweet spot. And so they can still go for their owner's points and so forth, because everybody's dealing with the same thing again. But I heard an interview today between Kyle Larson and Kevin Harvick. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but Kevin Harvick asked Kyle Larson about why does he go down to the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. And he said, I want to embarrass those guys. He says, we've got a lot of guys that are coming in from the short tracks. They think they're all this and that. And he says, when I go in there and I can go around those guys and lap them the way I do, they realize, oh my God, I do have some more learning to do if I want to race in the Cup Series. So that's his whole point. He wants them to understand, yeah, you might be all this and that when you're on the short tracks racing at home, but you're in the Premier Series now. And if you want to race in the Cup Series, you've got to meet a different level of racing. And that's what I'm here to show you, is that there is room for you to grow. You haven't gotten there yet. So that was his whole point in going into those series. And I thought, that was a really good point, because there are a lot of young drivers that are coming into the sport thinking that they have made it. and that they're going to be the next, sliced bread that what they used to call Joey Logano. And he said, I think there's a reason to put these guys in their place a little bit and just remind them there is still room to grow. And I have to agree with him. There are some drivers that are going through learning curves, especially in the Truck Series and in the Xfinity Series. They are on a different learning curve than drivers that are in the Cup Series are in. Now, there are a couple of drivers in the Cup Series, let me just say, that haven't quite got it yet either. But I will say, I think that Kyle Larson makes a really good point for him being in those series. And 5 races, I think, is the sweet spot for that to happen. So, Jay, we're back to you.
Well, you know me, there was too much agreeing on, so I'm going to go a little bit the other way. No, I agree. I don't want to see it go any less because I think there is value to it. I am okay with, like I said, as a fan, I was okay with them doing both series full time. Fans didn't like it. There were some money issues of it you're taking. I understand where NASCAR cut back. But also, Kyle Busch brought it up when he started getting restricted in the Truck Series. He said, for me to put together the 3 truck team, 2 full-time teams, and his part-time, part of that agreement for sponsorship was I get to be in X number of races. That's what carried the sponsorship for the entire program. So that's where I don't think that NASCAR can certainly go any lower. It was when they went from the Truck Series 7 to 5 that Kyle Busch Motorsports sold out. So you got to be careful of that because, again, that's part of a package deal when it comes to sponsorship, which is what drives this, the racing. So, like I said, as a fan, I'd be okay with them full time. I appreciate the talent. Like I said, when I witnessed Carl Edwards try and do it, Sharon, you and I watched Todd Gilliland try and do both the West and the East ARCA Menard series. That just added to that. And the other thing was, I'll accept that you're right. Maybe some drivers are saying publicly one thing, be like, oh yeah, we're learning, and getting off air and being like, man, get out of here. Don't doubt there's some truth to that as well. You know, again, we're all human and we just got our butt kicks. Yeah, we're not going to be thrilled. And, oh yeah, that was a great learning experience.
Oh, okay, Chris, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you go back to Eric Almirola getting his first Xfinity win with Denny Hamlin behind the wheel because a sponsor wanted that driver, that specific driver behind the wheel and not the guy who was actually leading the race. I believe that was at Milwaukee. I forget the sponsor name. But this is many, many, many years ago. At that point in time, you do realize that sponsors are always going to want the better driver. Well, how do you promote your feeder series if they're always going to be dictated by a specific sponsor requesting a cup driver? A sponsor is always going to want the best available driver. So NASCAR had to limit the availability of these drivers to basically, you know, make this a feeder series. And that's what the Truck Series is supposed to be. And the Xfinity Series, it's what it's supposed to be, a feeder series for the Cup level. I know that there was a time in an era where we had Jimmy Johnson, who basically flew through the Xfinity Series, never really was a high caliber driver that went on to win 7 Cup championships. Corey LaJoie, probably the most recent guy. We just really didn't see much from him in the Xfinity or the Truck Series. Kind of just got rushed up. But now we're at a point to where we've got like Corey Haim, Eric Jones. These drivers had to accomplish something in those series in order to get the call up. Of course, there's drivers like Ben Rhodes who may not ever leave the Truck Series, but that's fine as long as he's okay with that, right? We haven't seen him make the leap to Xfinity or the Cup Series. Maybe he's okay with where he's at. That's what we need. And in order to keep the sponsors from dictating what drivers are going to be in the car, NASCAR made a decision. We're going to limit these guys to 5 races. And if you really do the math, you could really have a Cup driver dominate each and every Xfinity race for at least 25 races, because if you put your Joey Logano's in 5 races, if you put your Ryan Blaney's in 5 races, and it was all separate from the races that Kyle Larson was going to race or William Byron. You could basically have the same rundown to the end of the year. But what's cool is it seems like a lot of the Cup drivers will jump in the same style race like I think we seen last week at Darlington or something like that, or even at Bristol. And so you've got Cup capable drivers, and then you've got Cup drivers who are driving in the Xfinity Series, and it's a good mixture. And so you do get some guys that are learning from these other guys, but at the same time, week in, week out, you're able to put a face to the race car. These guys in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series deserve the right to have some kind of identity in the series that they are racing.
Okay, Garen.
So I have two things. One of them is more so just something I saw earlier today, which made me laugh. I think it'll make you guys laugh. Is whenever we see like Kyle Larson go down and race in the Xfinity Series or the Truck Series, instead of putting them in the top equipment in both those series, we should start putting the best drivers in the worst equipment and see how well they do. I think that would be great. But secondly, the other thing I wanted to mention is these younger drivers taking spots in the Cup Series races. Whenever we had Connor Zilic come up with Trackhouse Racing back at COTA, and we saw what being a young, inexperienced driver can do to you whenever he ran into the back of the 99 there. It's always interesting to hear what another driver has to say about, like what you mentioned, Sharon, with Larson earlier today, and just saying, I want them to see how badly I can beat them. And I mean, that is great for Larson. And I think as a driver, when you're like, I know how good I am, so I want to prove to these other people how great I am, you do that as much as you want because you are the man to do it. But I'm someone who thinks, okay, while you do that, because these are people who are trying to make a career, trying to make a living, trying to make a name for themselves, because obviously they've already made their name and now they're trying to make it onto the national spotlight. And whenever you do get these smaller teams with these big name drivers coming in, like the Larsons, the Bushes, and then I like what Chris was saying, we need to get Penske in there. I'd like to see Penske in there too. That'd be really neat. But I do think overall, while there is an opportunity for the first 20-something races to be dominated by each driver, I think NASCAR, like we all mentioned, did find the sweet spot, and I do think that there's a reason why the CW is doing so well. It seems that the Xfinity Series is just doing great, and this goes back to what we were saying about Fox with the Cup Series. Everyone talks about how great the CW broadcast is, and I think that's also just a product of the racing. I think that the Xfinity Series right now is probably the best racing product, and I think there's a reason why that a lot of drivers in the Cup Series want to go down there and race in it, because I'm sure it's not even just the aspect of competition, but I'm sure it's fun as well.
Yes, it is. And it, for some drivers, it's just a boost to their confidence to come down into the Cup Series and be able to do well. But shoot, I had some things I wanted to say, and now I'm forgetting every one of them. With regard to, ask Daniel Suarez how he felt when he beat Kyle Busch. He was elated that and that was in the Xfinity Series when he was able to beat Kyle Busch. So, these drivers want to be able to beat those guys, the Xfinity Series drivers. And trust me, they do make a name for themselves when they're able to beat a Kyle Busch on the track. It is the thrill of their lives. And to deny them that opportunity to go out there and beat these guys is a mistake in my mind. I think that we've been saying it all night. NASCAR's found the sweet spot for it to happen. We get the best of both worlds. But I do think that it would be a mistake for them not to have that opportunity. Now, this is the first half of the season. And Jay, what do we say all the time? Wait till the second half of the season gets here, because a lot of these drivers going through that learning curve, they're going to be better. the next time around when they go to some of these tracks. They're going to be better when they go to the 1.5s because they've raced on 1.5 mile tracks, and they get a chance to go out there and do it again. And if they get a chance to go out there and beat the likes of Eric Almirola or Kyle Larson or any of the other drivers that are coming down into the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series, Ty Majeski, wouldn't he be just absolutely over the moon if he were able to beat Kyle Larson?
Chandler Smith did it this past weekend.
Imagine
exactly.
he beat Kyle Larson. That is a huge accomplishment. Thank you, Jay. Yes, he beat Kyle Larson. That's a huge accomplishment. And he did it cleanly. He's sometimes taken a knock for not getting a clean win. He got a clean win against Kyle Larson this weekend. That is the thrill of their lives. Why do you want to deny them that opportunity? Talk about a confidence boost. That is a huge confidence boost to those drivers. So I think, yeah, we've got the best of both worlds. I'll put it that way. Okay, are we ready for a new hot topic?
I think so.
Chris, I think it's your turn.
Oh, me again?
You again.
All right, let's pick one. Yeah, let's hit the charter thing with Legacy.
Yeah.
I think that kind of caught us all off guard there. I did not know that they were trying to secure a third charter, which means that they would be expanding as a race team. But it definitely caught wind pretty quick that something was going to go down there. Obviously, Rick Ware has filed a lawsuit.
No, Legacy Motor Club filed the lawsuit against Rick Ware. The lawsuit is about a charter agreement that they thought they had, and then Rick Ware backed out of the charter agreement.
Okay, so it was a deal that was supposed to go down, but they didn't. But I've heard that that Rick Ware signed the agreement. And
I've heard that too.
I don't know how you're suing for something that's actually yours. I can see where Rick Ware could sue because he was misled in a contract. So there's obviously something really going on with this charter. And it all comes down to, I believe, the 60 team, which is Ryan Preece right now. That charter is actually the charter that was being sold. But that charter was not supposed to be sold until 2027 because there was an agreement that at the end of the year, that 60 charter, which was running off of the old, I think, 51 team, would be switched out, and the 15 team would then, that charter would be the lease charter from RFK, which basically leaves Rick Ware Racing without a single charter to race for his own team next season.
It's really the other way around, though, Chris. Legacy Motor Club and Rick Ware had an agreement for Legacy Motor Club to get one of their charters. They did not get that charter because Rick Ware backed out of the agreement. And so Legacy Motor Club is filing the lawsuit against Rick Ware Racing.
So in this situation, it's kind of like when you go to buy a house and you pledge that you're going to buy the house and then you back out of it. They're basically going to come at you for legal fees and other things because there was you had basically committed to buying this and then you did. So
Legacy Motor Club thought they had a new charter from Rick Ware Racing because they signed an agreement, but when it was all said and done, Rick Ware backed out of it, and I think he wants to keep one for his son. That's the number 51 with Cody Ware. He wants to keep that one. But the number 60 that went to Keselowski Racing, I think, is the one that they thought they were going to get, and it went to a different organization. And so Legacy Motor Club is upset because they thought there was an agreement signed for them to get that.
for 2026.
Hold on.
No, for 2025.
Garen, do you have some information here? I saw you shaking your head. This is all confusing, and I think it's NASCAR's fault for doing the charter system. Do you have any information on that?
So information-wise, it's just from what I've read. But
Okay.
but just to put it point blank, like what Chris said, it's like when you agree to buy a house and then you go,
Yes.
nope, never mind. And what had happened is Jimmy Johnson took over the reins of Legacy Motor Club because Richard Petty stepped down. He's now more of just an influencer of the company, which I get for just, he's been in the sport for so long. Why not just enjoy your time? And Jimmy Johnson has been a very aggressive owner. I mean, he is someone that has been pushing to try to get Legacy Motor Club back, like toward the old Petty and the old GM. Yeah, all the old GMS, Petty, all that stuff, because it's just a huge conglomerate of people now, but they're all winners. And I completely understand what Legacy Motor Club did to where they're going to where they filed the lawsuit, to where they're placing the restraining order, to where Rick Ware cannot sell the charter. And that, because from my understanding, it was that the charter that Rick Ware had previously, I believe it was the 60 that you mentioned, that Jimmy Johnson and Legacy Motor Club had said, we were here to buy it, so you need to put an order on it. Because what I had read, if I can pull this up real quick, sorry about that, was
that's all right.
That it was because the order was granted and that Rick Ware would, let me get the last thing here. So it's because Legacy Motor Club has the rights during the course of the litigation. So it's right now because Rick Ware still owns the charter. So Rick Ware owns the charter still. Yeah. So whenever Jimmy Johnson said, hey, we're going to buy it, but it's not that Rick Ware has sold it to somebody else or said they're going to sell it to somebody else. I think it's more so that the team has said, no, we're just wanting to keep it now, which from a team standpoint, I get it, because these charters every single year are going up by tens of millions of dollars. So it's kind of like in this day and age now, I'd say it's like crypto or stocks, where you hold your stock and you want to sell it high. And Rick Ware's like, wait a minute, we could hold it a little bit longer. But Jimmy Johnson and Legacy Motor Club's like, no, we've already told you we were going to buy it at this agreed price and that we would have it. So it's confusing, and it
is confusing.
Like you mentioned, Jay, it's not. Sorry, it's NASCAR's fault, and this is why I just am not a fan of the charter system. But I understand, because you don't want teams to go to the track like these big name teams, and when God forbid it ever happened for a Hendrick Motorsports fan, but if Kyle Larson wrecked during qualifying, couldn't make it into the race, like you know what I mean? I get it, but I mean, we're also at a point where the only races you're going to see that many cars come in is at Daytona or maybe Indianapolis, and that's about it. I think would ever happen.
Well, the other thing that complicates all of this is NASCAR could have taken that charter this year and did not take the charter. After 3 years of non-performance, NASCAR can take back the charter. They chose not to take back the charter, so it was put back on the market to be bought through Rick Ware Racing, and then it gets all complicated by all the things that Garen just gave you. So is it clear as mud now, or?
No, I think it's still very clear as mud. First off, Garen, you and I can be friends. The problem is the charter system in NASCAR, and I'm not bashing on NASCAR, but I think they made a huge mistake, and Sharon hit on it. From my understanding, and I may be wrong because I don't like the charter system, so I don't pay any attention to it, but I don't think it has anything to do with the 60. I think that is a done deal. Rick Ware still has two. And I think one of them is the one, as Sharon said, could lose it due to non-performance. So they agreed to sell it. But now NASCAR says we're not going to step in. So now they want to keep it because they thought they were going to lose it anyway. That was my understanding of it. I don't believe that the 60, I think that was a done deal.
Yeah, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
take that back. Didn't the 60 come from one of the Stewart-Haas Racing ones?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what I was thinking.
There you
I know,
go.
You're
because
right.
I know
The 60 came from Stewart
it
Haas.
was RFK
It's a
bought
Ford
one.
to Ford. Yeah.
Yep.
Because it was RFK bought one, and did Cody Ware? I mean, did Rick Ware Racing end up buying the other one?
It was 2311.
Mm-hmm.
The 60 for RFK
And Trackhouse.
and Trackhouse. There we go. Yep.
There we go.
There we go.
It's the puzzle pieces of.
Yes.
We got a great team here. We put it all together. So that's where it goes back to. I think it is, as Sharon said, they thought they were going to lose it, so they agreed to sell it. And I'm going to step away from that because, again, the courts are going to handle it, apparently.
I think Chris is a little frustrated because we've gone 20 different directions here.
Well, and I think we're down to, though, what the core is of that establishing. Again, I didn't think the 60 had anything to do with it.
You're right.
What I looked at in that, though, however that works out, the agreement, and they filed the lawsuit and got and I'm not a lawyer, the temporary restraining. Okay. My question is why and what are they going to do with it at Legacy? We've been talking about Corey Heim in 2311. Either somebody from 2311, Riley Herbst, or possibly Bubba Wallace, maybe going over to Legacy, or Legacy is the one that, through Toyota, gets Corey Heim. I think that to me is the more exciting thing of they want the charter. They filed the lawsuit to say, hey, we want this charter. We had it. Let us have it. My question is who is it and what are they doing? And yeah, I think Corey Heim comes into play in all this.
Okay, Chris just sent me something. Chris, you want to kind of go over this with everybody? Or let's see. Let me see if I can bring it up on my screen. Bear with me a minute.
What did you find, Chris? What did you dig up? Hey, Garrett, no, I appreciate you reading that because, like I said, it took all of us to come back to all that. That's how badly confusing this whole charter system is. And that I'm going to let Sharon take over because I'll get real fired up.
Unfortunately,
the bottom three issue is the biggest issue is NASCAR never stood by that rule. What you got, Chris?
well, the 15 of Rick Ware Racing was leased to the 60 team of Ryan Preece, and that is on jski.com, where there's always been a mystery of where this third charter is or what happened to it. And I believe Trackhouse got one of those charters. And I think that, of course, there was four of them, Cole Custer and Factory.
I don't know if I can make this bigger.
Factory Haas is kept the one. And then the other two, one went to 2311 and the other went to Front Row Motorsports. So Ryan Preece and his team. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, he's got it outlined there. I don't know. Nobody can read that though, right?
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, you can read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't read it. So let me see if I can go over here to.
No, he's right. I had forgotten Front Row was one of the first that actually to secure one of Stewart Haas's. So
right.
I guess the 60 does come into play.
That's tied up into the litigation with 2311 and Front Row Motorsports. So, basically Rick Ware, what his plan was to do was this year he was going to loan out the 15 to the 60 car. And you can only lease that out, I believe, for one season, and then you have to bring it back. So they were basically trying to get that particular charter out of the dungeon area, right? Where, Preece is running really good. So now next year that charter will be of better value. It will have finished above top 30th place or whatever. And then next year, Rick Ware was going to switch out and give the 51 to
okay, so we were right.
Right. To RFK Racing. But the initial sale of this charter, which is the 60 car using the one the 60 car is using right now, that original sale is the one that was in question to a Legacy Motor Club. So that meant that Rick Ware was going down to just one charter. Where RFK was going to get their 13 from.
Can you guys hear me? My AirPods died.
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Okay. So, now that's leaving RFK to wonder where he's going to get his third charter from. And, obviously, $45 million was an upward rate, once again, higher than what BJ McLeod had sold their charter for. So Legacy basically wanted this charter for the 2026 season. That's when Rick Ware looked at the contract and was like, whoa, that's not how we have a business planned. We've already got structure for next year, so we're not going to sell this charter, because Legacy was trying to get it for 2026. And so, it's a breach of contract, I guess, with RFK and what they were planning to do. So Rick Ware had to stop the sale of this charter, because basically it means that next year there would be no Rick Ware Racing if everything goes as what was set. And and I believe maybe Legacy Motor Club might have snuck this one under his nose. They had talked about 2027, but when the contract was made, it was actually for 2026. So now that we've got all that specifically outlined,
Okay.
we can go back to the debate.
Okay, let me do this.
I'm going to go on mute and just shake my head.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where
So
we are right now.
Do you want to give your comments then, Chris?
My comment is there's a big mess up, and somebody's going to wind up losing a race team that was not expecting to have any issues. Can this be fixed if 2311 loses his lawsuit? Absolutely. Or if they win the lawsuit, all this could go away, because the whole idea of charters may completely disappear. That's what makes all this so crazy, is we don't know what to debate, because we don't know if there's even going to be charters in 2027, much less in 2026. So I'm with Jay. I'm so tired of these charters. I thought that they were here for a specific reason, which was to gain value within an organization. Then we watched a poor guy put his whole life into racing, right? This Levine fella from
Unintended
BK Racing.
consequences.
And just think about how close he was to paying all that debt, and lost his charters for next to nothing. And then within 6 years, BJ McLeod's making $40 million for selling his measly little charter. So, this thing has been nothing but a big screw up from day one. I believe, honestly, I'm going to say it right here, and you guys can follow me or not. I believe NASCAR is going to go into basically a situation where they're going to privatize. They're already a privatized company. So what they're going to do is they're going to wind up selling part of NASCAR to these cup teams for a specific amount. And that is going to have them bought into NASCAR. And that's how they're going to fix all this, because right now the charter system is a joke. There's so many different ways around it. There's no specific value. You literally have to have $1 billion. You're only going to attract hedge funds and billionaires to come into the sport to lose money. You're not going to convince a billionaire to come to NASCAR to not make a profit. And that's exactly what's happened with the charter system and with the way that the rule of NASCAR works. That's why, you've seen for so many years specific owners always dominating. And now it's just made it so much easier, because now Hendrick basically owns Trackhouse, they own Spire, they own anybody up underneath the Chevy umbrella, because Chevrolet's going to listen to Mr. Hendrick before they listen to anybody. Joe Gibbs. Denny Hamlin knows that his back's against the wall with Joe Gibbs. That's why he went out and got his own pit crew and started paying his own pit crew, because they were basically a fifth and sixth satellite team to Joe Gibbs. And at any point in time, Joe could come down and pick Denny's roster. He knows that he's only buying time, and he'll never be a top flight Cup Series team as long as he's having to buy his equipment from the boss man. So with that being said, I believe that the outcome to all this is NASCAR has privatized to basically sell parts of the company to specific owners. And with that, that will be where you've bought in, and then you'll get a piece of the pie when it's all divided up based off of how much of NASCAR you actually own. Is that the right way to either? I'm not sure. We need somebody more intelligent than us to try to figure all this out. And I'm not sure if anybody can figure it out because I'm a pretty smart fellow.
Oh, okay. I agree. Darren?
Well, Chris, I believe that you also are a smart fella, because I think that also should be the way that NASCAR needs to go about this. The fact, I just want to share here that I believe the reason why all of us were confused from the get-go is because we all kind of forgot that Riley Herbst existed, and that's no fault of our own. And
that's terrible. I feel bad about that.
I do too, but I mean, it's just the truth of the matter. And I believe that was the biggest issue as to why we forgot there. But honestly, and to get back to it, NASCAR screwed up. And Chris, I think what you said about they need to buy in, because something I hear a lot about is that these teams are non-profit teams. I believe Hendrick is someone that says that they are that they do not turn a profit from their team. That Rick Hendrick, he uses his own money and funds the team. So why not let these owners, these top tier owners, because to be an owner in NASCAR, you have to have money. Why not let them buy a piece of the pie in NASCAR? Because NASCAR has been struggling. And if you get money put into the sport by these teams who go, we want to be here, let us be able to put money into the sports pocket so that we can race, so that the fans can enjoy our drivers, because you don't want to have a problem where there's a holdout and that drivers aren't showing up, and you run a Daytona 500 with a few ARCA drivers and a few Truck Series drivers and a couple. You don't want that. No. Nobody wants that. And the truth of the matter is that NASCAR will find their answer, and I believe what Chris said is the right answer. But the overall issue with Legacy Motor Club, I grew up a Jimmy Johnson fan, and I know that everyone complains that he ruined the sport. And truth be told, I don't care, because it was great living in that moment when I was a young kid. But I was happy to see that Legacy Motor Club was pushing towards a third charter. And to bring up, I now can't remember who was talking about it, but now it brings up Corey Heim moving into a spot. And where's Bubba Wallace going to go? Where's Riley Herbst going to go? I love it. I love the chaos right now. But there's a reason why I don't worry about what driver is connected with a number until the Daytona 500 and the green flag is dropped, because this season it has taken me a while to get used to where drivers are right now, and it's because of the whole charter sell-off from Stewart-Haas last season.
Okay, Jay.
Are you sure you're going to let me go on this one? You know.
I know. Go ahead.
I'm going to say I'm a real race fan, and I want to see each and every week the fastest 40 cars show up and race. If that is not the top driver in the world, so be it. Kyle Larson goes home. Come back and try again next week. I understand the charter system of the intent that they wanted the value for the team owners that were committed. On paper, it was a great idea. It didn't work out. They said, okay, if you're a bottom team and just there to get the paycheck from the charter, we're going to take care of that. We'll take it away from you. But they didn't do it. And that's where I think the mistake was made. They didn't stand by the rule they had. They allowed manipulation. Oh, we'll lease it here for a year, take it back, lease you a different one, but put that one on the same team. All it is, just a mess. And they allowed it to go. They never stood by their rule. They had a rule, but they didn't enforce it. The issue I have with the thought of the teams buying into NASCAR under a privatization, and if you know me, you know there's going to be some backstory to that I won't go into, but you're going to let the inmates run the prison. And I don't think that's the answer either. Now you have drivers and owners that are going to have input into how a series is run. Well, all they're looking out for is the driver or team interest, So I think you need to keep that separate. That's just my opinion. And I'm going to go back on mute and shake my head some more.
I agree 100%. You cannot let the inmates run the asylum. And that's exactly what you guys are talking about. Somebody has to be the sanctioning body. Somebody, and I think that could be where they're going with this commissioner thing. I'm not 100% sure, but somebody has to be the sanctioning body. And the drivers will tell you they're selfish. They are selfish, and they know they're selfish, and they're going to try to get everything they can get. And I understand it to a certain degree. I know you're selfish on the racetrack, but there are unintended consequences to everything. And that's the one thing that you need to look at before you make all these agreements. This charter agreement has unintended consequences big time. I do think the partnership with NASCAR will have unintended consequences as well. And we're just giving you a tip of the iceberg when we say who's going to be the sanctioning body. Because you cannot let the drivers be the sanctioning body for themselves. That's just not going to work. So I do think it's a slippery slope. There's no doubt about it. It's turned into a real mess. And I don't envy NASCAR being in their position to have to try to weed their way through this. I know they've already said if they lose the lawsuit with 2311, they will get rid of the charter system. It will be over. So what they have in mind instead might be what Chris is saying. But I think that that's going to create another slippery slope. So I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But let's go back around the horn. Chris.
Yeah, so, I'm making notes here. We're past the point of a sponsorship basically owning the race team. See, we've been led to believe that an owner owns this race team, but we know Stewart-Haas Racing was created because one certain person was able to bring in some awesome sponsors, all on the name of Tony Stewart. We've seen what Haas Racing had beforehand. It was not a championship caliber race team. What made that race team a championship caliber race team was Opus Max, Opus Depot. It was it wasn't Office Max, whatever one, and it was Old Spice and Mobile One, all these companies. R.J. Reynolds, B.F. Goodrich, Texaco Haviland, DuPont, Lowe's, FedEx. They were the owners of the race teams. They were just considered a sponsorship, but the sponsorship was no longer a novelty as it was in the 70s. They were literally dictating the teams. And now that we don't have one specific tied in sponsor, and these guys, almost every Cup team but Alex Bowman and maybe one more, Joey Logano or something like that, they're different sponsors throughout the year that carry these race teams. And so now, you don't have a specific sponsor that runs the race team. Now you are literally having owners who have to either pony up the money or find somebody who has money to race these race cars. We've watched it change over the last 20 years. We've watched it at dirt tracks. We've watched it at short tracks. These kids show up with a bucket full of money, and some owner says, here's the hauler, here's the garage guys, park it back in the shop when you're done with it. And that's where we are at racing. And in order to stop that, we're going to have Dale Earnhardt Jr. says it himself. Well, you can't make a profit in racing, but he'll also tell you that he's never used his own money to race off of. So where does this money come from? It still comes from sponsorship. It's just not one specific sponsor anymore that's actually ponying up. As a matter of fact, one of the most interesting things I think I read in the last 2 years about sponsorship money was actually Richard Childress headed way amongst all the other teams by bringing in the most money of sponsorship. That hasn't collected over and turned into wins. So, it's definitely the business model has got to change. It's got to regroup. We've got to find something to where racing can stay sustainable. It's not just a NASCAR problem. It's not a F1 problem. It's an entire racing culture problem.
Okay, Garen.
Something that I have always been based off of is that NASCAR has always been a traditionalist sport at heart. It's where NASCAR, from the governing body all the way down to the driver. I remember everyone getting livid back whenever in 2020 we put underglow under the cars and we moved the number up a couple of years later. I think it makes the car look more like a race car. I do. I'm sorry to say it. I'm perfectly fine with the number being moved up forward. But back to the body of NASCAR, it worked for such a long time that now finally, after 75 years, 76 years now, I believe, NASCAR, the cracks are showing and the foundation is falling. And this has happened to every single American sports league out there. There's a reason why whenever you started the NFL, there were all these major corporations that were the CEOs and these millionaires at the time who bought these teams and said, hey guys, let's play football against each other. And that created the NFL for what it is today. And we see how big of a program that is now.
Yeah, that was pre-big money. Now it's all big money.
and NASCAR is at that point to where they need to look at the models of the NFL, the NBA, and look at what these major sports organizations have done and turn to what do we need to do for ourselves. For starters, the first thing needs to be is a drivers organization or a drivers union. And I understand that is going to that creates problems. We see a lot of holdouts recently with baseball a couple of years ago to where the players said, hey, we didn't get our agreement. But I mean, baseball's its own sport, it's its own culture of its own. But I believe if we're concerned about the drivers running the sport, why don't we just put the drivers into their own category of they get their own say as a collective? That way you're not going to have the top drivers who bring in the most money. You're not going to have to worry about your Hendrick Motorsports, your JGRs, your Penske's, who have all this money to be the leading force. If you make it to where you have your drivers union, where the drivers as a whole get a say, they elect a president every single year or every couple of years, I believe that will fix the issue with the worrisome of letting the prisoners run the jail. I think NASCAR has a lot of issues they need to fix, and we all see that. And I think once they start to look at other models and say, hey, this has worked, or hey, this is why this didn't work, they will be able to fix it.
Okay.
Well, I was reevaluating what I said. My friendship with Garen was moving the number. No, I was not a fan of that. So we'll have to talk about that offline.
I think you would have something to say about that.
And there again, though, I'm a race fan. Did I like it? No. Does that affect me watching a race? No. But the one lug nut, and that's another separate one. That's another one I wasn't a fan of. I do see you talking about the evolution, but you brought up a drivers union. They had that with the RTA, and they couldn't even all get along amongst the drivers, and that dissolved and went away. That's why I don't think then they need to be involved in the leadership of NASCAR, because they couldn't even get along as a group of drivers. Now you're going to have them engaging in the sport. Sharon and I have talked about this as being fans long term. Are we in a better place from the iron fist of Big Bill? And I understand it worked then, and that's the way it was. But we've seen that evolution of NASCAR saying, okay, we're going to listen to the fans. We're not going to knee-jerk reaction to everything they want because they change every day. But we are going to listen, and we'll work with it. But we also have to work with the TV partner. We also have to work with the drivers. We also have to work with the owners. And I think they've done a decent job of trying to take that input. As far as having the union, then you run into what you have in the other sports, because then they can say, okay, we're not going to come play. And that's where I see the problem with that. As Sharon said, an unintended consequence going down that road. I'm going to go back to, you open up the track, the 40 fastest cars come out here and race. We go home. The next week, you got a different 40 cars that are going to make it because somebody else is fast.
Yeah, that sounds really good, Jay, and I love it. I like that too. But we've got drivers out there that are wanting more. And NASCAR is an evolution. Look how far they've evolved from 1948 to where we are today in 2025. NASCAR is never, ever going to be perfect. It is constantly evolving because the times change, situations change. They need a new model now because the sponsors have changed. So it's a constant evolution with NASCAR. And that you're right. They had the RTA. The drivers didn't get along. They disbanded. The RTA went somewhere. We don't know where, but it's not there anymore. So the RTA is gone. They need an RTA. They should have an RTA. There needs to be NASCAR should not be involved with negotiating with each one of these teams. There should be an RTA that meets, identifies what their needs are, that liaison goes back to NASCAR, tells them what the needs are, and then they go back and come to a compromise. That's what negotiation is. Negotiation is about compromising. Nobody gets everything they want. Everybody gets something. So it is, they need an RTA, somebody who represents the drivers, somebody who represents the owners, and somebody who can meet with them and identify what those needs are and take that back to NASCAR and negotiate with NASCAR. There used to be union negotiators. I know that because I had an uncle who was a union negotiator. That was his job, to be the liaison between the company and the employees and to come to that agreement. They need an RTA negotiator. Somebody who can bring the parties together and come up with the compromise, find the common thread and work it out. They don't need to be merging the two together because that is disaster written all over it. And I just think that's the wrong way to go. I do think that if we did get an RTA system back into place and we had the negotiator, the liaison negotiator, to work between those two organizations, I think that there would be, we would be in a better place. Are there unintended consequences with that? Probably so, because unintended consequences mean that you don't foresee those happening. They happen because something changes and you didn't expect it to happen, and now you've got to adapt and evolve the organization again based on those unintended consequences. But to me, that seems a lot better than some of the other things that I'm hearing. But that's my opinion. You guys have your opinions. So do we need to go around one more time? It is 11 o'clock now.
Yeah.
Okay. Chris?
I mean, I just wanted to point out the obvious. Hendrick has close ties with Chevy. Hendrick sells motorsports parts throughout all of forms of racing. They have an engine department that Hendrick horsepowers in all forms of racing. Penske has a racing empire. All of his sponsors are just billboards for cross-playing, from the type of oil that they put into their Penske trucks to, what types of, Freightliner, all those are tied within the company of Penske. JGR, he's got his ties to TRD, Toyota. Those manufacturers really come in handy when you're the top tier team. The separation of competition has come because basically Hendrick doesn't need to make money off of their cup cars. He makes money in so many other places. Penske makes money in so many other places. And Joe Gibbs, his organization is 10 times what it was when he became part of the Toyota umbrella. And now every other Toyota team that was ever part of Toyota, they're gone. So all the teams that have been created in Toyota after have been post Joe Gibbs Racing being, directly affiliated with TRD. You look at the sponsor issues that JGR has had over the last few years and you think to yourself, how has this guy stayed afloat? He stayed afloat because he's directly tied to TRD. So these guys don't have to make money from the top. They have other sources to make money through. The rest of the teams are struggling to figure out how to stay competitive and not go bankrupt at the same time. As I said, no billionaire loves to go in and waste a bunch of money. Look at Michael Jordan. There's a reason why Michael Jordan is pressing for a change in the cup level, because he sees that he can sell as many Nikes as he wants to. He'll eventually go broke running a cup team with this model that they have right now.
Okay. Garen.
I mean, yeah, I think Chris hit it well, and that's why it's so funny to me that I think we may get to think Michael Jordan as the savior of NASCAR at some point, which is really
where he is,
which is really odd. Because I mentioned with Jay earlier on my show on Wednesday was that Denny Hamlin he seems to be the voice of reason for drivers and fans. And whenever he makes his opinion heard, it seems that everyone, if you like him or not as a racer, seems to agree with him. And it seems like 2311 as a organization, thanks to their lawsuit with Furniture and then with NASCAR, it just seems that 2311 is going to somehow, some way manage to fix the sport. And Chris, like you said, with all the money, that's the problem. Is that your Spire Motorsports, they rely on Hendrick, and then your 2311, they rely on JGR, and it just makes it difficult as even just as a fan, not even as a journalist, not even as someone who's trying to just cover the racing or the series and itself. As a fan, it makes it challenging because you wonder, how long is this team going to stay around? I'm someone who enjoys seeing Carson Hocevar. He's someone who's my age. I'm 21 years old. He's 22. He's someone that I can watch and relate to because he says stuff that I understand. And it makes it easier for me, but I get worried because what happens if NASCAR goes, hey, you need to buy in here, or if NASCAR goes, oh no, our charters, we're just going to get rid of the charters and you're going to come back and rebuy them, which is something else I've heard where NASCAR's just going to take them all back and then re-give them back out. And that's just something that just doesn't make sense to me. And it's overall, Jay, you say it straight and I love it. Just put the 40 cars out there and let them race. And I wish we could go back to that. Sadly, we're not at that time anymore.
Go back to top 35 with a past champion provisional, please.
Yeah.
Those were the good days.
I wasn't real happy with that either. The only thing I will say was you at least had your way and ability to race your way back into the top 35 to lock yourself back in. That's the only advantage that I see to that. Other than that, it was just the beginning of what is now the charter. I will say this. I'm glad I'm just a NASCAR fan who gets to sit on his couch and talk about it and not in NASCAR leadership. I agree but disagree with Chris and Garen here. I understand the business model may need to change, and it has been pointed out by the lawsuit with Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin, 2311. But I don't think they're the savior and going to fix anything, because I still believe that they're there for themselves and the airspeed shop they bought that they're trying to pay for. Again, hey, you chose to spend money there. We didn't make you spend that. So I disagree from that aspect of it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think all voices need to be heard. I don't care if you're the multimillionaire or the team that's struggling. All of those voices need to be heard. And that's where I think an RTA and a negotiator, and in this case, maybe you need more than one negotiator. You probably need 2 or 3 negotiators that are working together. But I do think that all voices need to be heard because, great leadership is when you listen to everybody and you maybe agree here and disagree there. You take little bits and pieces, but you've heard everybody's voice and you take the best of what you've heard and you make a decision. And that's what a union negotiator can do. They can hear all of the voices and go through that and find where the compromises can happen. and where the agreements and common threads can be between NASCAR and what's happening with the teams. And I think you need somebody representing the teams. You need somebody representing the owners. You probably need somebody who's representing the tracks, and all the way around the horn here. But and TV rights, all of that. But the model does need to change, because what they have now is not working. It's really not working, and it's being manipulated and used improperly. So, Chris.
Yeah, I would like to make one last statement. If you look at all the other stick and ball sports, they all have one thing in common. They all use one style baseball. They all use one style football. They all use one style basketball. We have different cars, and there's not a way to regulate right now who can spend more money on that car. Until you regulate that, that's going to be where the competition is going to continue to separate themselves from the who's and the who's nots. The reason why baseball carries the same ball throughout the whole league is because if the Atlanta Braves were using a specific ball that they liked, they may have an advantage over another team. Until we cut out what is the main product of our sport, which is a race car, we cut out the ingenuity, and we make it to where they can only spend a certain amount of money on this car per year or per race. We're always going to have the haves and the have-nots. When you go back and like I said, when you have a controversy with a guy who was deflating balls. Why was that a controversy? Because he was playing with a ball that other people didn't have. He was doing something, manipulating that ball. When you cheat on a race car, and we know racing and cheating are hand in hand, innovating is what we call it. As long as you have that, and you have people who have an endless amount of pockets to buy things, you're going to have a separation of competition.
Okay, Karen.
It's the last thing I've got. Chris, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one, because I understand what you're saying about the teams need to have a limit of money. In a perfect world, that makes sense. But look at it this way. Yes, in baseball, they play with the same ball, but there's a reason why the Dodgers have a player that's making $700 million in a contract. And then you look at the Oakland or the Athletics nowadays. Sorry to get into baseball now.
That's okay.
And I'll step off of it. But the Athletics are a notorious team of never spending any money and getting rid of any player that spends any money. I do not think NASCAR needs to worry about how much a team is spending on a car. I think NASCAR needs to focus on what advancements are made on a car. Like you said, the innovations. So NASCAR needs to see, because it is their car right now. This is NASCAR's car. And that was the point of the Gen 7 car. And they know where a team might shiv a little bit off at some point, or may add a little something, or may take away a little something. And they've caught almost every single team that's done it. So I think NASCAR's done a pretty decent job of it so far with it. And I don't really have any complaints to them about that.
Jay, I know you have something to say about innovation.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think they need to give a little on that. Something you were saying, though, Chris, of until we go to the one ball, and I get into this of all the time. NASCAR is racing. It is not a stick and ball sport. Now, can you learn certain things from another entity or another different sport? Yes, by all means. Again, don't be closed-minded, but it is different. You talk about that of one car, one template. That was called the IROC series, and it went away. I mean, that's where you run into that issue. So we got to be careful there too. That sounds good, and the Gen 7 car was kind of in that direction, but not fully. I still think that NASCAR could allow a little bit of ingenuity, but I also say then, hey, if we give you an inch, don't take two, or we're going to smash your hand.
Okay.
Not slap your hand, smash your hand.
Smash it. I'm going to go back to a conversation that we had recently about that innovation, and they have an R&D center. And I think we talked about the possibility that they were allowing some innovation, and that's why they might not have had cars going back to the R&D center. because they were allowing some innovation. So I don't know for a fact that NASCAR isn't allowing some kinds of innovation within the sport. It's not necessarily made public, if you will, but it could still be happening. We talk about drivers that get their win, and then they test throughout the season different things to see what gets by and what doesn't get by. As you say, NASCAR is pretty good about catching a lot of things. But I do think that there might be some innovation that maybe we're not all privy to, but NASCAR is allowing kind of behind the scenes, if you will. So could there be more? I don't know how you allow for more innovation and still keep the level playing field, other than the way NASCAR's doing it, which is kind of behind the scenes and under the slide. I do think that they learn every time they do take cars back to the R&D center, and they talk with the teams, and they work out little deals and whatever. I do think that goes on without it being privy to all of us. It doesn't need to be privy to all of us if they're allowing that kind of innovation to be happening. If it's allowing them to grow the sport and develop a better car, I think that's a good thing. So I don't know. I do think that I'm with you, Garen. I don't necessarily agree with everything that is being said there with regard to comparing it to the stick and ball sports and the football teams and stuff like that. I do think that NASCAR has to look at it from the racing perspective. It's not the same as stick and ball sports. It's not the same as football. Can they learn from them? Maybe some things that they could try as part of their evolution, maybe. But it's comparing apples to oranges. Their evolution is very, very different from the evolution of what's happening in NASCAR. Football's evolution is different than baseball's evolution. Hockey's evolution is different than baseball's evolution, and so it goes. So every sport has their own unique evolution that's taking place and their own unique challenges that they're dealing with. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how NASCAR deals with all of this because I'm like Jay. I'm glad I'm here and not sitting in their shoes, because they've got a lot smarter people than I am to be able to sit there and figure all this stuff out. But I think we had a really good discussion here tonight. Jaron, I hope you enjoyed it and that we didn't burn you out on the first night that you're with us.
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, like I said, I love talking about it. So if I can find an outlet to talk about it, I'll use it. And I'm glad I get to be around people who help me learn more about the sport and also take away different opinions about it. So I'm very happy I'm very happy to be here and excited to do it again. Maybe.
Maybe. That says a lot right there. Okay, Chris, thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciated your input. It's always good to get different inputs because Jay and I tend to agree on quite a bit. And it's good to get another side of the story and other input. And you bring that to us, and I love it. Even though we don't always agree with it, I like hearing how other people are thinking about this. So I love it that you bring that to our conversation, Chris.
Thank you so much. And may I leave with the fact that even the Oakland A's turn a profit at the end of the year. Right? So we're a sport that doesn't ever turn a profit with our teams. I think that's got to change. But thank you so much, Sharon, for giving me the opportunity to be on here as a seasoned podcaster veteran. We've been doing this since before it was called podcasting.
Yes.
It's you've given me an outlet to still voice my opinion, and I don't want you to agree with me most of the time. I want to make I love good storylines where we can all agree with certain things, and from our own perspective be able to articulate that to other people so that they have maybe a more informed opinion. So many times I think in this sport and other sports there's the bandwagoners that kind of lead the narrative. In racing, everybody has their own appearance, and look, we know a Darfin when we see one. And if you listen to Dave Moody, there's a whole lot of them that are just like, wow, like that guy has zero intelligence. Most of the time, these little podcasts like this are probably some of the most informative racing shows that you can be a part of or listen to.
Well, and Jay Hughesman, you've been around for quite a while now too. And I don't know what I'd do without Jay Hughesman, because he fills in when other people can't be here. And he is a stalwart of this radio program. So thank you so much for all that you do, Jay.
Well, I thank you, like Chris did, of the opportunity to be on here. And Garen, you gave me one again the other day. I know it didn't go the best, and hopefully I didn't have any phone issues tonight, but it was great to have you on. And having taken everything in tonight, I don't know if y'all remember the movie Basketball. I've made a decision. Garen, you're my new best friend, because the one sitting to my left here on video, no, I'm just kidding, Chris. No, it was great to have you on, and I hope that you are able to come back. I know Sharon and I have talked about that, she was looking for that. And I think it was great. Like she said, we have 4 different opinions, and that's great. But we can all still be friends when it's said and done, just having different opinions. So that's the biggest thing. I enjoy it. And again, that's because I'm a race fan and I like to talk about it.
So
a real race fan. Sorry, it's a real race fan.
We'll maybe invite Garen back again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. We would love to have you come back again, Garen. I know it's a maybe on your end on whether you'd like to come back. But
I'm just tired. That's all it is. I'm here on the East Coast, so down in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
That's all it is.
Oh, yeah. We're really keeping you up late. Do you have to get up early in the morning?
Yeah, I have class at 9, but it's my last week, and then I'm done until some summer classes. So I can be back on again. I'll be good. I'll be good.
Okay. Well, whenever you want to come back, we'd be happy to have you come back. And I can be the facilitator, and I promise I will try to not input.
It's okay.
Because I get carried away too. I try to be the facilitator, and it's just tough to do. But anyway, thanks to everybody. We had a good time. We hope everybody enjoyed the stream as much as we enjoyed doing it. And we'll be back again next Monday night for another Hot Topic Sound Off conversation, because somehow after these races, we always have something to talk about. And we didn't even get to all of our hot topics here tonight.
There at the end, it actually sounded like there were a couple. I was like, well, we need to not get too deep into them. We'll have to carry them over.
Exactly. So we've got some carryovers and probably some new things to talk about on next Monday night. Jay and I will be doing the preview shows for Rockingham coming up this weekend for the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the ARCA East Series is racing this weekend. So we'll be doing all 3 of those previews between Thursday and Friday. And then we're right back to the reviews on Monday. So stay tuned. We always have more coming. We're working on a few interviews too. So stay tuned for that. As soon as I have confirmations, we'll let you know, and we'll move forward from there. So thank you, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Oh, I forgot one thing we got to do before I leave. Go around and talk about what you're doing, what your handles are, all of that real quick, Chris.
Yeah, Flag of Caution on Twitter, Chris Creighton on Facebook. You can find us, or you can find us this weekend at Rodney's House of Hook in Why Not, Mississippi, Why Not Motorsports Park. We're going to have the Mississippi State Championship Challenge Series Super Late Models. They're 800 horsepower ground pounding machines. They're invading the House of Hook this Saturday night. be there.
Or B square.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, Jay.
You can follow me on Facebook, Michael Hoosman, MoparMJ8 on Twitter and Instagram. And I don't know what I'm doing Saturday night. I might follow my neighbors, the Rickmans, on down to the House of Hook there. So I didn't realize they were racing this weekend. Jackson ran this past weekend, had a good show. So the Capital City Raceway is off for the weekend. I think we're going to be back on the 26th and then 2 weekly shows in May. So, yeah, maybe I'll go down and see my new non-friend, Chris.
Okay, Garen.
You guys can find me on X at gbach2003, and the company I work for is Bleacher Brothers. And on Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. is when I host my show, NASCAR Lap by Lap. I'm still not sure about who our guest will be, but regardless, it will be just another breakdown of Bristol, and then should have a guest of some sort like every week, and then at the end it will be my betting picks, which I did very well on Ty Gibbs. I relied on the 54 and I made some money over the weekend, so very happy about that.
Ooh,
all right,
we've been looking for a fantasy guy.
Yeah, some of us are trying to stay away from the gamblers. Now I got to go back and rethink this.
Okay, we have to talk, Garen.
Sounds good.
Okay. Hope everybody has. I am Fan4Racing site on Twitter, Fan4Racing blog and radio on Facebook. Thinking about going the TikTok route. I'm not sure if I want to go that route yet, but I've heard good things about it, so we'll see. I am just going to be around watching the races over the weekend. So, and doing my thing here on Fan4Racing Radio. So, we're going to say goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.